Hi friends and welcome back to No Book Left Behind. I'm your host Mark and today is my end of July reading roundup. So how did I get on in the second half of this sweltering July on my Read What You Own challenge? Well, before the month began, I was on 60 books out of my 105 target. And in the first half of the month, and you'll notice if you watch my mid-month video, I read 5 books. And those were Into the London Fog, Eerie Tales of the Weird City, even, edited by Elizabeth Dearnley, which was the 16th volume in the Tales of the Weird series, and pretty solid it was. I also read William Vance's book Bait, which was published as part of a noir series called the Black Cat series by Starkhouse Press, but to be honest with you, really it's just more about sex and exploitation than noir. I didn't enjoy that one very much. Then there was... This was enjoyable. This was Face It by Debbie Harry, the autobiography of the front woman from Blondie. Yeah, I really did enjoy that and would recommend it. I also read House by the River by A.P. Herbert on my Kobo device, and that was a book that had some great passages of writing in it and some awfully boring passages too, so it was a real mixed bag for me, that one. And lastly, I read The Films of Lana Turner by Lou Valentino, which was an overview of the actress's career, an actress I think is probably the most underrated from classic Hollywood. So those were the first 5 I read during July. How did I get on in the second half of the month, pushing that total on? Not very well, I'm afraid. There was some other stuff going on and I didn't do so good, but I'm going to go through the books I did manage to read. So what did I read in the second half of the month? Well, the first one was one I've already talked about on the channel already, in fact in last week's video, because that was Queens of the Abyss, Lost Stories from the Women of the Weird, which is volume 18 in the British Library's Tales of the Weird series. And obviously I review those books in sets of 3, and last week's video was a review of number 16, Into the London Fog, Weird Woods number 17, and that one number 18. So you've already had my thoughts on it, but just to be brief and go over it again quickly in case you haven't seen that video. My favourite tale in this book was From the Dead by Edith Nesbit, which is an absolute cracker. Not a complicated plot by any means, but a superb telling of the story. She managed to achieve that kind of morbid obsessive quality that Poe has in his best work, and I don't think I've rarely read it anywhere else, so I thought that was a cracking story. And also I really liked Margaret St. Clair's The Island of the Hands, which is technically speaking a science fiction tale, but it's just a wonderful rumination on the nature of true identity rather, and also the kind of throws in a bit of the old doppelganger folktale as well. And now I love the mix there. I thought that was a really great tale and I'll be seeking out some more of her work. Overall, I thought it was a very solid volume indeed, and another great entry in what's a tremendously consistent series. Now after that I moved on to this next book here, which is Jeffrey Deaver's The Kill Room. And this is number 10 in his series about the quadriplegic forensic detective Lincoln Rhyme and his partner, the cop Amelia Sachs, and their efforts to solve increasingly bizarre and strange murders. Now on this occasion, an anti-American activist has been assassinated in the Bahamas, and the kill order was issued by a very shady section of the Security Department of the US government. But the kill order was leaked to New York Assistant DA Nance Laurel, who is determined to prosecute whoever's responsible because, although he may have had very anti-American political leanings, the victim was a US citizen. She recruits Rhyme, Sachs and their team to help, but unfortunately the crime scene is in another country. Crucial evidence has already gone missing, and it's not long before they find that any leads and witnesses are being killed off because there's someone out there doing cleanup, and it's not long before that unknown person has turned their attention to Rhymes, Sachs and the team. Now this is a very unusual entry in the series because for the longest time this feels rather more like a political thriller than anything else. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with author Jeffrey Deaver trying something new and tweaking the formula a little bit. It keeps the series fresh and original. But I have to say, I'm not a great lover of political thrillers. And for a great part of the narrative, the forensic evidence, which is usually the basis of these novels, just simply isn't there, and Rhyme finds it difficult to get his teeth into the case. And I must admit, I've felt the same way with the book to some extent. Also, this mysterious clean-up artist is a gourmet chef, and he's obsessed with his culinary skills. There's an awful lot of in-detail information about recipes, ingredients, and cooking methodologies, which is impressive in small portions, but I felt decidedly overstuffed with information by the time I got to the end of the book. But reading the acknowledgements in the back, it would appear Deaver is quite the foodie himself, so perhaps he simply couldn't help himself and got a little bit carried away. Now, don't get me wrong, this is still a terrific thriller with plenty of twists and turns and reverses in the best Deaver style to keep you on your toes. And he even drops a massive clue fairly early on in the narrative, which nobody picks up on, including me. Although I must admit I was thinking in the same ballpark generally from time to time as the book went on. However, it was one of those things that when he makes the reveal, you just sit there thinking, why didn't I see it? It was so obvious. But then that's the skill of Deaver. He is an absolute master at this stuff. Now, I would recommend this thriller very highly. It's still a great read, but it's probably my least favourite in the series due to the political thriller aspect of it. I just hope that Sachs and Rhyme get back to hunting for serial killers now, because otherwise I think in the future eventually we're going to see them hunting for nuclear launch codes and saving the world or something, and I really do think that would be a little bit too far away from the original concept of the series. And now on to my third and final book in this particular video, I'm afraid to say, and that's Retreat to Oblivion by David Goodis. And this was originally published in 1939, and it was the author's first novel. Now, if you're not familiar with Goodis, he was a Philadelphia-born author who wrote 18 books over a career roughly spanning 28 years. He's best remembered these days for a novel called Dark Passage, which was his second book. And that's because it was turned into a movie with Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. It's one of the four that they did together, and if you've not heard of it, it's probably because it's rather overshadowed by the other three, To Have and Have Not, The Big Sleep and Key Largo, which are of course all acknowledged as all-time cinema classics. Goodis wrote superb noir thrillers, but his work tended to fall between the cracks after his death in 1967, the majority of his books only remaining in print in France. Thankfully, now he is beginning to receive the recognition that his superb work deserves. And to that end, we've got a republication of his debut novel from the wonderful Starkhouse Press. Now, I've always wanted to read it, but long ago I resigned myself to the fact that I probably would never get the opportunity, because it was not reprinted as far as I can tell after its initial run, and the only copies available online were original first editions, and they were going for over $1,000 a piece, and that's way out of my price range, obviously. Now, it's absolutely wonderful that Starkhouse Press have republished this book under their Noir Classics label. Unfortunately, there's one slight problem. It's not very noir. This is principally the tale of two couples, Herb and Jean Hervey, and Paul and Wilda Schoen, as they try to navigate their way through life and love in the big city in the late 1930s. All are dissatisfied, bored and unfulfilled, lashing out both emotionally and sometimes physically at each other and the world in general. Jean is in love with Paul and persuades him that they should run off together, but he's only interested in going to China, where he plans to fly in the war against the Japanese. Not caring too much about being left behind, Herb falls for Dorothy, whose husband is away fighting in the Spanish Civil War, while Wilda waits patiently for Paul, as she's convinced he will eventually come back to her. Unable to commit to Dorothy, Herb begins an affair with a woman called Helen from the advertising agency where he works. To me, this comes over as a blue-collar version of Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises, or maybe Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, with those wealthy flappers of the 1920s being replaced by a new lost generation, the working-class stiffs of the 1930s. Still cluelessly thrashing about, trying to find some meaning to their lives against the backdrop of armed conflict going on overseas. So is this really a noir novel at all? Well, there's no crime committed here, or even contemplated, save for the occasional bit of personal violence and a drunken shooting. Having said that, Goodis does give us a cast of familiar noir characters, ones that will become very familiar in his later work. We get the quietly desperate men, whose flaws and weaknesses lead to bad life choices. We also get the passionate women, who find nowhere worthwhile to send their passions, and so go off in very ill-advised directions instead. All these people crashing almost blindly into the vagaries of fate, and struggling to crawl out from underneath the wreckage afterwards. Without much of a plot outside of their personal struggles, the novel does feel a little formless at times, but it's to Goodis's credit that I still felt fully engaged and wanted to stay on board to find out the outcomes that each of these characters would receive. In terms of style, there's a lot of run-on sentences in the best stream of consciousness tradition, even though it is told in the third person. And you'll be familiar with this if you've read any of Goodis's other novels. Here, however, it is a little bit more pronounced. I think as his work matured, he got a little bit better control over this tendency, used it more sparingly, so it was far more effective. All in all, it's certainly not a stunning debut novel by any means, and I much prefer his later work. However, it did engage me, and I'm very glad that I got the opportunity to finally read it. So yes, I'm afraid that's all I managed for the second half of July. Just 3 books, and I am very disappointed with that, because that does put me somewhat behind in my mental target of trying to finish this Read What You Own challenge by October, because I've now only got 3 months left, and well, let's run the numbers and you can do the calculation yourself, because you'll be able to see what the total currently is. So have you read any of these books? What did you think of them? What do you think of my terrible failure to read more than 8 books this month? I know quantity doesn't really matter, but I would really like to get this challenge over with by October, as I've got other reading plans for that month. And I do really want to get back to being able to buy books again. It's extremely frustrating not being able to. Please put your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. I'd appreciate hearing from you. And if you stayed with the video all the way to this point, please pop me a like, or even think about subscribing to the channel if you've not already done so. It would be much appreciated. I'm hoping for 250 subscribers by the end of the year. That might seem very small potatoes to some people, but it would be a big deal for me. So, in the meantime, please don't forget to keep searching through those narrow side streets of your own hometown to find those strange, dusty, forgotten second-hand bookshops. Please keep going to those charity sales, to those car boot sales, and to those market stalls, because there are treasures out there that only you can find. Be seeing you.